Let's talk about MongoDB. So MongoDB is one of many databases that fall under the umbrella of NoSQL, NoSQL databases, and NoSQL database pretty much means just that, right? That there's an alternative way that we can represent or store or retrieve data for permanent storage, right? Even though NoSQL has, I mean, even though SQL has been around for quite a bit and has been pretty much the standard by which we do permanent storage, long-term storage, there's certainly many other alternatives that are out there that have not been as prominent, perhaps, as SQL. Um, uh, but lately, with the explosion of web and kind of JavaScript taking over everything, not NoSQL databases based on JSON data storage have become more and more prevalent and more popular. Um, since we've been slowly implementing all the different tiers and all the different layers of a multi-layer application, we've been looking at JavaScript alternatives, right? So certainly Angular and React, but certainly JavaScript clients that run on a browser, and it would be just so more comfortable and so much more convenient if the data representation that is already being consumed and generated in these clients, if they would be also stored in for long-term storage by the database, right? If you consider the stack where you have Java in the middle tier and relational databases in the back end, there's a lot of places where there's a lot of data mapping that goes along between the various layers, right? You have JavaScript, JSON on the front end that needs to be converted into a object-oriented language, a data representation such as Java, and they don't necessarily map very well JSON and Java. Java is so much more richer. Right? There's many supports a lot of more data types and many features that are just not supported in JavaScript. And then we have to convert it into another representation, which is the relational database, which again there's a lot of um, um, there's a lot of impedance between the two data relationships, right? There's just a lot of features that are just not supported by the relational database, right? Inheritance is not supported. The the references between the way you implement many to many or one to many is just implemented backwards, right? In both worlds, where in Java you have each parent having references to their children. In relational databases is backwards, right? It's the children who have references back to the parents, and whereas MySQL is very flat, right? And the way you create hierarchies is by having these references of pointers of foreign keys to primary keys, whereas in Java, the hierarchy is implied by having classes contain other classes using has-a relationships, right? So all these transfers, these conversions between the different layers is just very inconvenient. You have to do a lot of tagging, a lot of annotations to give clues on how is it that you convert between the different worlds, right? That you have to do the mappings of this is a one to many, this is many to many, and this is referenced by that, and it's mapped by this. Use this representation. Do not use this other representation. That put the foreign key over here, put the foreign key over there. It's just there's a lot of hints that you have to give to do the mappings between these worlds. So with when you decide that the data storage is already stored in a convenient representation that is already the way you're going to consume it in the client, everything becomes so much simpler. Um, so we're gonna spend some time in MongoDB. It's just one of several. Redis, CouchDB, Dynamo. There's just tons of these alternative databases that I welcome you to invite you to explore all these other alternative databases. We just happen to be using MongoDB. And it just works very well with the other technologies that we've been looking at, Angular and Node, and together they have become a very popular combination of technologies that happen to work very well. They're not necessarily a stack per se, or even a framework. And a framework typically you would have all the different layers knowing about each other, right? So that whatever you do in one part of the framework somehow affects other parts of the framework. They're aware of each other, whereas over here they're not, right? They just happen to work very well together, right? So the I'll ask for the upcoming assignment and for this lecture, I'll be asking you to download the MongoDB from the download center. There's a if you go to MongoDB, they'll try to sell you their enterprise database solution, and also they have some hosted services that they have. These are all for pay. But there's a free version, the community database server that you can download, and I'm asking you to please download that and install it locally in your machine, and that's what we're going to be using for the remainder of the semester. It'll for Mongo to run, you'll have to create a couple of directories where it's going to store the files where all the databases and schemas are going to be stored. By default, it's going to look for a directory called /data/db, right, off of the root. If it doesn't find it, when it starts up the server, it's going to complain. You can put it anywhere else you want, but if you put it anywhere else, you'll need to tell it where to find it. But by default, that's where it looks for it. Also, when you install it, there'll be a couple of executables in the bin directory of where you install it. In the bin directory, there'll be a couple of executables. Two of them, in particular, are of interest to us. Right, one of them is the server itself, right, the database server. So, just like there's MySQL D to start MySQL, there'll be a Mongo D, right, to start the daemon. It'll start up. It'll start listening at a particular. It'll look for data for /data/db, and it'll start listening at a custom at a standard port, which again you can override. But and then the other executable is the Mongo client. Just like this MySQL for a client, there's a Mongo client which will try to connect to the server, and then you can do a command line. Interact with the database at the command line. All right, so to start the server, you can just start saying sudo mongod, or on Windows it's just mongod. And I'll ask you to please add the wherever you did install it, wherever you end up installing it, please add it to your path, right? So that from the terminal you can just run mongod or just mongo, so it's available everywhere. On Mac, I think you need to put sudo in front of it, otherwise it won't run. You need to log in. When it starts up, it starts up the server, and it'll say that it's listening at the default port of 27017, and it'll look for data, /data/db, and then listening at the port for connection. So the Mongo client is you start by at the command line. So let's play around with that a little bit.